In 2019, Illumination released another sequel, but this time not from Despicable Me, with The Secret Life of Pets 2. Set a little while after the first movie, Max's owner gets married to a guy named Chuck and has a son named Liam, who Max soon becomes overprotective of. But while visiting a relative's farm, Max is taught by the tough sheepdog, Rooster, to become more courageous and not to be so defending of Liam. Meanwhile, Snowball, having given up his villainy from the first movie, adopts a superhero persona and helps a dog named Daisy rescue an abused circus tiger named Wu, which puts them on the radar of the cruel circus ringmaster, Sergey. Elsewhere, Gidget is tasked by Max to look after his favorite toy, Buzzbee, while he goes to the farm. But she loses Buzzbee in a cat lady's apartment and enlists the help of Chloe to blend in with the cats to retrieve the toy. Universal and Illumination announced a sequel to the first movie in 2016 with Chris Renault and Brian Lynch returning as the director and writer respectively, and Chris Meledandri and producer Janet Healy taking on the roles as co-producers. Oatmeal writer Matthew Inman was brought into the film as a creative consultant. One of the most standout things during the making of this movie was that Max's original voice actor, Louis C.K., could not return to voice him. Why? Well, if you know about the whole he said, she said stuff that was going around back then, you'd understand where this was going.
Oh dear God.
Several actors were considered to replace C.K., like Joel McHale, Jason Lee, Andy Samberg, Ed Helms, Bill Hader, Ryan Reynolds, David Cross, Will Forte, Ashton Kutcher, Sean Hayes, Chris Pratt, Owen Wilson, Luke Wilson, and Jack Black. Ultimately, though, the role went to character actor Patton Oswalt, who signed on in April of 2017, while almost all of the cast from the first film reprised their roles. Speaking of actors, several more of them were considered to voice the new characters of the sequel. Like Liam Neeson and Robert De Niro were thought up to voice Rooster, but the part was given to Harrison Ford, a fact that I talked about in my Blue Sky videos when talking about Ice Age: Dawn of the Dinosaurs, and this became Ford's first voice animated role. Going back to the actors, Sean Astin was considered to be the voice of Chuck before Pete Holmes was given the part. Adam Sandler, Jason Sudeikis, and Justin Theroux were considered to voice Sergey before Nick Kroll, who previously voiced Gunter from Sing, accepted the role. And Leslie Jones was thought up to voice Daisy before the part was given to Tiffany Haddish. There are a few scenes that appeared in the film's trailers but didn't make it into the film proper, like Leonard, the poodle from the first movie, rocking out again and Buddy massaging himself with a mixer again while Mel tries to get to the bottom of a blender. These were cut out due to time constraints or to avoid controversy. Also, at one point in the film, Snowball has a fantasy where he imagines himself as Captain Snowball, which is done in cell shading to look like a comic book. For the movie's music score, Alexander Desplat was brought back from the first film to compose the music. The soundtrack was released by Backlot Music on May 31, 2019, which features 3 cover versions of Paul Simon's Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard, Designers, Panda, and Bill Withers' Lovely Day. The songs were performed by Kevin Hart, Lunch Money Lewis, Amine, and Jack Antonoff. Also, Illumination made the film by once again using a 1.85 to 1 ration after previously halting on doing that after Sing. The Secret Life of Pets 2 was supposed to be released in the Unitard States on July 13, 2018, before getting delayed for a year on July 3, 2019, before finally settling with an earlier release date on June 7th of the same year, but was preceded by its release in the United Kingdom 2 weeks before on May 24th. When the film came out, it received mixed reviews from critics, who praised the animation and comedy but criticized the story. It got an approval rating of 60% on Rotten Tomatoes. Courtney Howard of Variety magazine stated that it's unusual for a typical Illumination broad comedy to include a heart-rending message that makes parents feel less alone in their very real, visceral struggles. It's just cloaked in a shenanigans-soaked romp about what pets do when humans aren't looking. For the box office, the movie grossed out $159 million in the United States and Canada, and $287.2 million in other countries, gaining a worldwide total of $446.2 million, against its production budget of $80 million. 2 months later, the film was released on digital on August 13th by Universal Pictures Home Entertainment before getting released on DVD, Blu-ray, and Ultra HD Blu-ray 2 weeks later on August 27th. All of which included 2 mini-movies. Super Gidget, and Minion Scouts. The 4K Ultra HD version was also Universal's first time releasing a film using the HDR10 Plus format. And speaking of DVD release dates, I'd like to go off script here for a moment and say that when I talked about Hop a while back, I completely forgot to add in its release date of March 23, 2012, just almost a year after the movie came out in theaters, and copies of the DVD include some featurettes and games, along with a traditional Illumination short titled Phil's Dance Party. I am sorry that I completely forgot about that.
What took you so long, idiot?
The Secret Life of Pets 2 received some award nominations, like Outstanding Achievement for Voice Acting in a Feature Production, which would have been given to Jenny Slate for her role as Gidget, and Outstanding Achievement for Editorial in a Feature Production, a People's Choice Award, and was nominated in 3 categories at the 2021 Golden Trailer Awards for 3 mini-trailers it gave out. The only reward it received was a Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Award for the performances of Kevin Hart as Snowball and Tiffany Haddish as Daisy. In March of 2022, just a couple of years later, Meledandri proclaimed during an interview on the podcast The Gary and Kenny Show that a 3rd film is in development. Now, what are my thoughts on the movie? Well, to put it simply, I like the first film much better, but the sequel does have some things to like about it, like the character of Rooster is pretty interesting, and I did find Daisy to be a fun new character, and one of the trailers introduced me to the song All These Things That I've Done by the Killers. Few complaints I have is that Gidget's subplot feels kind of boring, and the later half of Snowball's plot, when they visit Pop's apartment for help, feels a little awkward. Other than that, though, it's a movie that I could take or leave. The Secret Life of Pets 2 may be an original piece compared to its predecessor and has a lot of its own merits to appreciate, but I wouldn't call it a sequel that's superior, just maybe not as good as the first. If you paid attention to what I said in the honorable mentions part in my Blue Sky animated history video, I talked about a certain worldwide disease that reared its ugly head in late 2019, just around 5 months after The Secret Life of Pets 2 came to theaters. Yep, I am once again talking about the coronavirus, aka COVID-19. Again, if you've been paying attention to what I said in the aforementioned video, you'd know that I said that the movie industry suffered from this since most studios, be it for live action or animation, had to delay their film release dates until this whole mess blew over. Illumination was one of those studios, since their sequel to Minions had to be delayed for 2 straight years. But before we get into that film, let's talk about another sequel that came out in 2021, Sing 2. After Buster and his friends fail to impress a talent scout named Suki, who works at Red Shore City under media mogul Jimmy Crystal, they decide to go to Red Shore City to audition for Crystal. In hopes of gaining Crystal's approval, Buster lies and says that he is friends with an old singer named Clay Calloway, which convinces Crystal to greenlight a theater show called Out of This World, with the promise that Clay Calloway will make an appearance. This sets up many plots for the movie, Buster and Ash needing to find Calloway, who has hidden himself from the public when he retired from music, Johnny having to rehearse dancing from a very strict dance coach named Klaus, but gets help from a street dancer named Nushi. Mina is forced to partner up with an egocentric actor named Darius, but ends up falling for a vendor named Alfonso, and Rosita has to conquer her fear of heights since her part in the show requires her to be high up. On January 25, 2017, about a month after the first film came out, the people at Illumination announced that the sequel was in development. People who returned for the sequel were the writer and director of the first movie, Garth Jennings, Chris Meledandri, and some of the actors who played the original group. The only exceptions were John C. Reilly as Eddie and Seth MacFarlane as Mike, who was cut from the sequel entirely because MacFarlane wasn't interested in coming back.
Are we giving Seth's voice a rest?
In December 2020, other voice actors were announced for the film, like Bobby Cannavale, who voiced Jimmy Crystal, Letitia Wright, who voiced Nushi, Eric Andre, who voiced Darius, Chelsea Peretti, who voiced Suki, longtime singer for Illumination movies, Pharrell Williams, who voiced Alfonso, and singers Bono and Halsey, the former of whom voiced Clay Calloway, who was made as a tribute to musician Cab Calloway, and the latter of whom voiced Crystal's daughter, Portia, respectively. Some of these characters had different names during production, like Suki was first called Dixie, Nushi was named Vivace, and Darius was supposed to have the name Elwood. Another tidbit about the actors is that this is the first animated movie where Letitia Wright, Chelsea Peretti, and Bono starred in. The film's development was forced to shift to being done remotely due to the coronavirus epidemic, which caused Illumination's Paris-based branch, MacGuff, to close down for a short while. And on a lesser note, once it reopened, it was rebranded as Illumination Studios Paris. The scope of the theater as seen in the film's ending was a huge accomplishment, as there were over 10,000 animals seen in the crowd, some of which were new and old designs made by Eric Gillen, and he also designed new characters like Klaus. The costumes worn by the characters were made by the fashion brand Rodarte. To promote the film, Tomy made a deal with Illumination to develop a toy line for Sing 2, which featured plushies, collectible figures, and a role-playing game. Other promotional partners included Roblox, which held an Adopt Me live event, Xfinity, McDonald's, Kellogg's, and Mercury. For the movie's score, Joby Talbot came back to compose the music. The band U2 performed the film's original piece, Your Song Saved My Life, which was released on November 3, 2021. Other music included songs by Kiana Lead, Sam I, Billie Eilish, and Elton John. The soundtrack was released on December 17th, 2 weeks after the U2 song was released. The movie was supposed to be released on Christmas Day 2020 before COVID forced it to be released nearly 6 months later, on July 2, 2021, before settling on December 22, 5 months later in Real D 3D, after first premiering as the opening of the AFI Fest celebration on November 14th, and has other early access screenings that happened 13 days later on November 27th. The movie received okay reviews from critics, with an approval rating of 72% on Rotten Tomatoes. Hollywood Reporter-writer Justin Lowe praised the movie's musical set, saying that the ragtag cast that Buster had brought for an amateur cast had blossomed into a full-fledged company of professional performers. For the box office, Sing 2 received $162.8 million in the United States and Canada, and an additional $245.6 million in other countries, gaining a worldwide total of $408.4 million. Bizarrely, 2 weeks later, on January 7, 2022, Sing 2 got released on platforms such as Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV, Vudu, Xfinity, and even on YouTube. This caused the film to make 393.1 million impressions across all social media platforms, a statistic 24% above movies released before the pandemic.
Incredible.
The movie only received one award, which was Outstanding Character Voiceover Performance for Letitia Wright as Nushi. It received nominations for Best Original Song for Your Song Saved My Life, Best Soundtrack Album, Outstanding Animated Motion Picture, Best Edited Animated Feature Film, and so much more. Sing 2 was soon released on Blu-ray, DVD, and Ultra HD Blu-ray on March 29th, which included 2 shorts called For Gunther's Eyes Only and Animal Attraction. Meledandri soon announced in April of 2023 that a third film is in development. Going into my personal thoughts about the movie, I thought it was a more or less okay film, possibly even better than the first. I liked the expansion of the Sing world, and some of the new characters were alright. Though I thought Buster lying his head off just to get his way felt like it was rehashing the first movie, and some scenes I didn't really care for. Other than those nitpicks though, Sing 2 is a gracious sequel, all things considered. After Sing 2, Illumination finally released the long-awaited Minions sequel, Minions: The Rise of Gru, after 2 years of being put on hold during the pandemic. After Gru takes in the Minions since the last movie, he ends up attempting to join a group of exclusive villains called the Vicious Six, who betrayed their leader and his idol, Wild Knuckles. When they turn him away, Gru steals a magical amulet called the Zodiac Stone, which can transform a person into an animal from the Chinese Zodiac line in revenge. After one of his minions, Otto, loses the amulet, Gru is soon taken by Wild Knuckles, and they team up to retrieve the artifact before the Vicious Six, who go on a manhunt for Gru, attempt to take it back. Following the success of the first Minions, Universal and Illumination started developing sequel ideas in August of 2017, and Eric Gillen came up with the plot element of exploring Gru's early life. Both Pierre Coffin and Steve Carell came back to redo the Minions and Gru respectively, with Steve receiving $12.5 million for his contribution, which was 25 times the salary he got for the first Despicable Me back in 2010. Like with Sing 2, the movie's production was shifted to being done remotely during COVID since said disease caused Illumination Studios Paris, while it was still called MacGuff, to be shut down for a while. To incorporate the 1970s environment within the movie, stuntman Wade Eastwood and screenwriter Rick Myers were hired as creative consultants, while local Asian Flora Zhao was asked to join as a cultural consultant on Chinese culture, since some of the movie takes place in China.
Where you go college?
Tufts?
Never heard, not real school. What you do?
I'm an eco-consultant.
What that? That sounds stupid. How much you make?
About $200,000 per year.
Welcome to family.
Getting into some ideas for Minions 2, Bell Bottom was supposed to turn into a tiger when she used the Zodiac Stone, but the filmmakers decided that a dragon would be a better fit. The tiger form was given to one of the vicious 6 members, Svengeance, who was originally called Magnus, and he was supposed to turn into a boar by the Zodiac Stone. One last idea that never made it into the final film was that Wild Knuckles had a son. Speaking of which, on some depressing news, Minions Rise of Gru was the final acting role of the guy who voiced Wild Knuckles, veteran actor Alan Arkin, who died shortly after the film came out. Arkin wasn't the only death connected to this film, though his animator Madeline Montero died during the making of the movie, which ended up being dedicated to her memory. The film's music score was done by longtime Illumination composer Aitor Pereira, and the soundtrack album for the film, which was released through Decca Records and Verve label group. An additional soundtrack, made by Jack Antonoff, consists of various artists covering famous musical hits in the 1970s, like Turn Up the Sunshine by Diana Ross and Tame Impala was released as the album's lead single on May 20th, earlier followed by Kali Uchis's version of Desafinado and St. Vincent's version of Funky Town. Pereira released with 2 versions of Bad Moon Rising and You Can't Always Get What You Want, both of which were performed by Steve Carell and Pierre Coffin, both of which did not appear in the original soundtrack, alongside a new version of the Despicable Me theme song by Pereira and Pharrell Williams, which had a chorus of children that was used in the film but not included in either the score or the soundtrack. All of these, apart from the lead single, were released on the film's release date, which I'll get to shortly. The movie was marked with Universal entailing an active social media campaign and worldwide activations and tours. The promotional partners were CarMax, HelloFresh, IHOP, Levi's, Liberty Mutual, and McDonald's. Deadline Hollywood stated that Universal has spent $140 million promoting The Rise of Gru and a total of $285 million on marketing, which was the largest ever campaign for a Despicable Me movie.
Oh my Titan.
Now, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, the movie was supposed to be released in summer of 2020, and coincidentally, the movie was officially made on July 1st of that year. Unfortunately, the coronavirus came along and the movie had to be postponed until a safer time to see it would come. The people at Illumination attempted to release it on July 2nd, 2021, but that went nowhere, so the film, after debuting at the Annecy International Animated Film Festival on June 13, 2022, alongside premiering at the TCL Chinese Theater in Hollywood on June 25th, Minions: The Rise of Gru was finally released on July 1st, 2022. Before I go on, I should probably mention that the Minions sequel was banned in Lebanon. While the cause for this ban hasn't been given, it's rumored that the reason was an account of the character Nunchuck, since she is a negative representation of nuns. Not just that though, but the Chinese release of the movie replaced the ending where Wild Knuckles fakes his death to a Where Are They Now? Epilogue that explained what became of Gru and Wild Knuckles. Getting into the movie's reception, it earned generally good reviews, even getting a 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. Johnny Oleksinski from the New York Post gave the film 3 out of 4 stars and proclaimed, while a tad too light, as these films often are, nobody is making animated characters as funny or likable or marketable as the Minions. For the box office, the film grossed out $370.3 million in the United States and Canada, and $569.9 million in other countries, giving it worldwide total of $940.2 million. On a minor note, it managed to set the record of successful films released during Independence Day weekend, surpassing films like Transformers: Dark Side of the Moon, but finished in second on its second weekend and fell behind Marvel's Thor: Love and Thunder, adding into how much money the rest of the Despicable Me movies has made alongside The Rise of Gru. the Despicable Me franchise broke $4 billion at the global box office. The movie was released for digital download on August 30th, over a month later, and on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray, and DVD on September 6th, the week after. Physical copies of the DVD feature behind-the-scenes featurettes, an extended scene, outtakes, and traditional Illumination short films Minions and Monsters and postmodern Minions. The Rise of Gru ended the best-selling home video release of September of that year, with Blu-ray being accounted for 48% of its sales the movie for, and at the end of 2022, its release managed to gross about $14 million. The Rise of Gru was nominated for many awards like an Annie, an Outstanding Achievement for Animated Effects in an Animated Production, an Outstanding Achievement for Storyboarding in an Animated Feature Production, a Golden Trailer Award, and a Saturn Award. Like with The Secret Life of Pets 2 though, the only award it won was the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards for Favorite Animated Movie. Like with the rest of the films I talked about on this video, another sequel for Minions is being made, with a release date planned for June 30th, 2027. Before I talk about my personal thoughts about The Rise of Gru, I should probably address that a popular internet meme about the film, which is about groups of young adults dressing up like Gru and the Minions attending the film, which gave inspiration for the tag #GentleMinions and started spreading on TikTok almost immediately following the release of the movie, and was usually accompanied by American rapper Yeatsaw, Rich Minion, that was actually commissioned for the film's trailer. This ended up disrupting many movie theaters that a bunch of movie establishments in the UK forbade groups of young men in this attire from attending the movie. There were comparisons made from this to other memes surrounding the Sony superhero movie Morbius, which came out 3 months earlier before The Rise of Gru, but long story short, both meme hysterias had different views since the latter film was given poor reviews when it came out. Illumination itself realized the meme and even participated in it by posting a video that showed the Minions joining in the hysteria.
If you can't beat him, join him.
Now, for my thoughts on the movie, I thought it was a pretty good sequel. I liked the bond between Gru and Wild Knuckles. I found some of the Minions moments to be very fun, and the Vicious Six are entertaining villains. As a whole, I wouldn't say that it's my favorite in the Despicable Me franchise, and I like the first Minions movie better. But that's not to say I found the sequel to be inferior. Minions: The Rise of Gru has gone through a lot to be seen by many. Was it worth the 2-year wait? I'd say more or less.